Hello viewer, this is Elim TV and I invite you to Form 1 Physics lesson number 3, Introduction to Physics. The study of the day will lie on basic laboratory safety rules. So we're going to discuss basic laboratory safety rules. I'm your teacher, Benjamin K. Makanda. Stay with me and enjoy the lesson. Now to begin our lesson, we want to begin by looking at the specific objective of the lesson. And by the end of this lesson, the learner should be able to state and explain basic laboratory safety rules that we're going to discuss. Then lesson preview will follow this order. One, we're going to review lesson 1, review of lesson 2, Then after that, state and explain the basic laboratory safety rules, after which we will attempt some of the questions that will help us understand the entire discussion in the lesson. So we shall have a lesson assignment at the end of the day. So before we move to our main subject of the day, which is the basic laboratory safety rules, let's first of all have a review of lesson number 2. In lesson 2, we discussed physics as a subject and some of the career opportunities that are there in physics. We also discussed the relationship between physics and other disciplines, that is other subjects like biology, chemistry, physics, name them all. We also related physics with the technology, and we were able to understand that if you pursue physics, if you study physics, then there are various fields in which you can venture on once you finish your studies at the Form 4 level. Now, having said that, today we want to look at the basic laboratory safety rules. And now, before we begin our discussion of basic laboratory safety rules, I want to pose this question. Why do we have to follow and observe basic laboratory safety rules? Of what importance are this? Do we follow laboratory or safety at home? Even on the roads, we observe safety. Now, what are basic laboratory safety rules? So, the basic laboratory safety rules come from this statement. Since learning physics emphasizes on practical work, and it is necessary that certain rules are followed to ensure safety in the physics laboratory, because physics is a science that deals with practicals. So it's a hand-on kind of a subject that will require the use of hand and all that, including movements. So whatever items you are using, equipment you are using, you have to actually follow and be very keen when it comes to your safety. So this one being a practical subjects, then all activities that lie within the physics laboratory should be observed. And the reason behind this is to ensure that we minimize accidents in the laboratory. Now, the reason why you have to follow laboratory safety rules is that the two common causes of accidents in the laboratory are ignorance and carelessness. You are in the laboratory, but you actually ignore some of the things that happen. Rules are very basic, but if you fail to follow rules, then that one is ignorance. So some of the things that we do in the laboratory to cause accidents are because of our ignorance. Not that we don't know, but we know, but we tend to ignore them. Also, we are very careless in terms of how we handle issues and activities in the lab. And these are the common causes of accidents in the laboratory that have to be observed. Now, accidents in the lab, accidents are minimized in the lab when rules are followed. So when you follow rules strictly in the lab, then accidents are going to be minimized in the lab. We're not going to have cases of accidents and all that. So minimize accidents in the laboratory by following rules to the latter. Now let's look at some of the ways in which we can minimize accidents in the laboratory. So we want to begin by looking at the basic laboratory safety rules. Now this first one is here. So I want you to tell me, what does this one mean? So I have a photo here, and this one is a warning, no running. Meaning that the laboratory is a confinement that is very, very small, and therefore running is actually prohibited. You don't have to run in the laboratory. Because in the event that you run, you are likely to actually cause accident that may harm you and your colleagues who are operating in the laboratory. Therefore, this warning is telling us this: never run in the laboratory because you may injure yourself or other users of the laboratory, such as your fellow students. So if you run in the lab, then you may cause injuries to yourself and even other users of the laboratory. So you don't have to run in the laboratory. That's the first laboratory safety rules that we have to observe. The other one is this one here. What does this one mean? And this one is very common. You move to the lab, you are carrying a bottle of water. That water is food. So in the lab, we don't have to drink, no food, no drinking in the lab. So this is what we say about this. Never taste or eat anything in the laboratory to avoid poisoning. Because the laboratory is made up of various chemicals, some of which are very poisonous and may contaminate whatever you are eating and therefore cause poisoning. So we don't allow eating and tasting of anything in the laboratory. So that's why this want us to understand is this one here. We have another one here. So these are laboratory skills. How do you learn the laboratory skills? They don't just come and go to the laboratory for the first time. You don't know how to handle those apparatus. You don't know their names. Therefore, you need someone to direct you on how to use them. Therefore, when you are directed on how to use the apparatus and guided, then you attain or gain skills in the laboratory. So, what you're supposed to do, according to this, you're supposed to always consult your teacher before trying any experiments to avoid accidents. So that when you consult your teacher, the teacher will guide you on which kind of experiment to be done alone and which one can be done by the teacher. So in the process, you gain laboratory skills which will end up minimizing accidents in the laboratory. So that's why you have to attain these lab skills by actually, first of all, consulting the teacher or the laboratory technician. A lab technician is the person in charge of laboratory activities, so that if you don't have a teacher in the lab, you can also consult the lab technician so that your skills can be built up. So the other thing that laboratory safety rules is this one. We can learn. Yeah, let's interpret the photo. We have check labels on chemicals and containers so that if you look at the containers in the laboratory carrying various chemicals, you look at the labels, they will be able to tell you which kind of chemical you are handling and to what extent can it actually harm you. So you label all the chemicals before you use in the laboratory so that when you are using them, you will be able to understand how they can be able to be used in different ways. Otherwise, some chemicals are very, very dangerous, and if they are not labeled, they may cause a lot of harm. So like in this case, we have it, so you have to label them. So what we are saying here is that label all the chemicals you are using to avoid confusion, because some of them may be harmful, and in the process, maybe you're carrying out an experiment with a chemical that is inflammable, a chemical that is likely to catch fire very easily. If it's not labeled, then chances are that it is likely to cause actually fire in the laboratory. So we have to label all the chemicals carrying the containers carrying all the chemicals to avoid confusion, which may end up causing accidents in the laboratory. The other safety rule that we have to follow is that while in the lab, we don't just sniff anything. Don't smell anything around you. If you actually feel a smell in the air, there's a way in which you're supposed to do. So this warning is telling us not to do that. And this warning is a gas precaution. Never inhale or smell chemicals in the chemical fumes. So some of the chemical fumes are very harmful. So all chemicals reactions make gases. So if these gases are smelled or you actually inhale these fumes, then they are likely to cause accidents. So what are you supposed to do if you're carrying out an experiment that leads to the production of a gas? This is what you're supposed to do. Never smell gases directly. Instead, you waft the gaseous fumes near your nose with your hand. You waft. You're using your hand to actually blow the air towards your nose. That's wafting. So that harmful fume of the gas does not directly get into you, which may end up harming you, so you don't have to smell directly. The other basic safety laboratory rules that we're supposed to observe is that in the event that we have fire in the lab, and we only have one exit, and in the laboratory we have a lot of students maybe. So how do you react to the fire in the lab, an accident caused by the fire in the lab? One thing, you don't have to actually scramble for a single exit. You run in an order. So what we are saying is that in this particular warning here, we are being told you don't have to actually use flammable materials in the lab. So if you're using flammable materials, then always ensure that you keep them away from fire. Always keep flammable substances away from flames because they easily catch fire. Flammable substances are those substances that easily catch fire, when they are exposed. A good example is a petrol. When you release the petrol to the atmosphere, the fumes actually evaporate and they easily catch fire. So they can actually make the lab to burn. Potassium is not kept in the lab because of the same reason, because it's highly flammable and it can also cause fire in the lab. So all flammable materials should be kept away from fire so that we minimize accidents occasioned by fire in the lab. And as I was saying, in case we have a fire, an accident occasioned by fire in the lab, and we have to escape from the lab, we don't have to actually scramble for a single exit. We have to follow order when you're moving out of the lab, and that's why we need to have this kind of a sign, just showing us that one is the exit. You have to follow that exit, and in that exit you follow order. You don't actually run, because in the process you scramble for the same exit, you are likely actually to fall and then block you in the same exit, which may now cause a bigger loss. So what we are saying is that in case of an accident, do not scramble for the same exit, because it may hinder easy escape. Yeah, so you have to observe some kind of order when you are getting out of a lab that is on fire. So that is the basic laboratory safety rule that explains how you are supposed to escape out of the lab in the event that we have fire in the lab. The other one, which should be the last basic safety laboratory rule, just like it is at home, you don't actually make food on a dirty table. You have to make your table clean before you can actually set it for either lunch, supper, or etc. So even in the laboratory, we work on the benches. And these benches must be kept clean so that whatever we are doing it without actually a lot of interference and all that. So our benches should be kept clean. All the waste that are generated should be properly disposed, so that by the end of it all, we carry out an experiment that is successful. So what we are saying here, you ensure that your benches are kept clean all the time when you are in the lab. Before, during, and after your lab session, ensure the benches where you are working from has been kept clean, so that you don't have cases whereby the congested lab bench, for example, may cause some kind of accidents. So what does clean benches say? Always work on clean bench. After completing your experiment, clean all the pieces of apparatus you have used and return them to their correct storage. Yeah, this is self-explanatory. You have just had your meal on the table, you don't leave the plates there. You have just had your experiment in the lab, you don't leave the apparatus there. You must take them you must actually clean them, arrange them, and take them back to the places where they are correctly meant to be kept. These are some of the basic safety laboratory rules that should be observed. And if you observe these basic safety laboratory rules, then if you're conducting an experiment in the lab, then you will end up having a very successful experiment at the end of the day. Now, in summary, this is how we can be able to summarize the basic laboratory safety rules. So this is a summary of basic safety laboratory rules. The first one, on my extreme left, I have danger. This is a hazardous voltage. This one is actually used in cases where we're using an alternating current. So alternating currents are very, very dangerous. So especially when they are carrying a high voltage. So we use this one to actually give you a warning that this is a hazardous voltage and it can cause what? It can cause a lot of accident. Then the other warning is about fumes. We have just discussed about fumes. There are fumes that are inflammable, and if left exposed, especially near a fire, then they are likely to cause a lot of accident. Then this other one is about hot surface that can conduct or may cause burn. So some hot surface may actually cause burn. You have to be very careful with them. Then we have this other one here that actually showing on how you can be able to avoid what? Avoid injury, among other signs that are there, including the ones that we have on the road. Those are some of the signs that help us actually guide ourselves whenever we are in the lab, so that we conduct our experiments in the lab without actually incurring or causing accidents to ourselves and the other laboratory users. Up to there, I hope you have enjoyed your lesson. And before we wind up, I have to give you this assignment so that you are able to attempt it. So this is our assignment. This assignment revolves around what we have discussed. And the first question that you have to attempt is just one. With explanation, state what students should do in case of a major accident such as fire occurring in the physics laboratory. With explanation, state what students should do in case of a major accident such as fire occurring in the physics laboratory. So this is one question that you'll attempt, and if you want to get the answers to this, you refer to the discussion that you have just had in our lesson. So before we call it a day, I also have this one that is very important for you, safety quote, because safety is very important and safety begins with you. Either in the lab, at home, and wherever you go, you have to actually observe safety. So this is our safety quote for the day, and let's read together. What does it say? Safety first, and you're using the symbol of a key. Safety is like a lock, but you are the key. So if safety is like a lock and you have the key, then you are the one to open that lock so that you remain safe. So that's the end of our lesson. Until next time, stay watching.